All right, we're going to start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's forum for candidates vying to be the next state representative for the 1st Essex District. My name is Dave Rogers. I'm the editor of the Daily News, and it's my honor to be here tonight moderating tonight's discussion. The forum was organized and is being broadcast by Salisbury Community TV, Amesbury Community Television, and the Greater Newburyport Community Media Hub, which is also producing tonight's telecast. A special shout out to the Merrimack Democrat Party for their input as well. The 1st District covers Newburyport, Salisbury, parts of Amesbury, and now Merrimack. And the 4 candidates from left, C.J. Fitzwater, Byron Lane, Don Shand, and Samson Richoppe. Byron Lane and Don Shand are both from Newburyport and are both running as Democrats. Charles C.J. Fitzwater and Samson Richoppe is both of Salisbury, and they're running as Republicans. Before tonight's forum, each candidate drew a number to determine who sits where and who answers the first question. So it's that way. They are all hoping to succeed former State Representative James Kelcourse, who stepped down from the post to assume a position on the state's parole board. Because of that, Mr. Kelcourse's name will appear on the September 6th Republican primary ballot as a Republican candidate. All four hopefuls are running as write-in candidates, with 150 votes needed to qualify for the November state election. Should Kelcourse receive the most votes on September 6th, he will be given the option of withdrawing his name from the Republican ballot. The Massachusetts Republican Party would then form an executive committee to appoint the candidate of their choice. That choice may not be one of the 2 candidates seated over there.
Can you repeat that?
The Massachusetts Republican Party would then form an executive committee to appoint the candidate of their choice. That choice may not necessarily be one of the 2 candidates seated before me. So no candidate's name will appear on the Democratic primary ballot. The candidate with the most write-in votes on September 6th will represent the Democratic Party. For tonight's discussion, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. I will then ask candidates a series of questions, with each candidate getting 90 seconds to respond. Later on, candidates will get to ask each other questions, with each candidate getting a minute to respond. If there's time, I will ask more questions before each candidate gets to a minute for a closing statement. Some of the questions were submitted by the public. And without all the way, I'm going to start asking some questions. So is everyone ready?
Sure.
All right. So CJ, you go first.
And I'm just going to do an opening statement.
Yes.
Hello, I would like to thank the Daily News in Newburyport, SCTV, Amesbury Cable TV, Greater Newburyport Media, Merrimack Public Access TV, and the Newburyport Senior Center for the opportunity to be invited to this important forum. And I'd also like to thank Freeman Condon. My name is C.J. Fitzwater. I'm only here because of a tragic event that happened just over 2 years ago, just about 100 miles away from here, when a young man decided to end his life. That young man's name was Dominic Golston. At the same exact time that he made the decision, I was at Tufts Medical Center on life support waiting for a heart transplant. So Dominic and I are here together. We ride together, Dominic and I tell you his name because I told his mother I would tell his name anytime I tell that story. I've dedicated my life, including this campaign, to telling his story and bring awareness to mental health. Folks ask me all the time, has my life changed because I walk with somebody else's heart beating inside of my chest? I don't think my life has changed, but it is more evolved. Every day I get to know Dominic more and more. I believe we live in the greatest time in the history of the world, in the greatest place in the world, right here in the 1st Essex, which includes Merrimack, Amesbury, Newburyport, and Salisbury. It is beautiful, it is safe. We have great opportunities for our children to receive a tremendous education. We have the best health care in the world, the safest gun laws in the country, with beautiful rivers and beaches. The rail trail connects 3 of these communities with plans to connect Merrimack. I really love where I live. Our communities are vibrant, growing, and there is always something to do. I hope to be elected to continue a legacy of constituent services. Our past state rep, Jim Kelcourse did such a wonderful job at. I look forward to answering questions tonight. Thank you.
Hey, Byron, your turn.
Great. Is the timer ready? Can you hear me okay? Great. I am Byron Lane. I am from Newburyport, Mass. I actually split time. I grew up both on Oakland Street and Milk Street in town. Actually, where I'm sitting right now is about where I went to 4th grade, where ironically Mr. Raymond called me Mr. President. I get a kick out of that. I have a lot of pride in my hometown. I'm the product of a single mother who was a nurse for 43 years, and she raised me with the common core of treating people right and act with kindness. My intentions as your state rep is to give you a voice at the House to rally for things like school funding and infrastructure funding, as well as the Merrimack River and the health of our ecosystem. I've been in my second term as a city councilor in Newburyport, where I serve very proudly. I've done a lot of good things. I've been through budget cycles. I have a lot of good relationships at the House and with various leaders across the state that I intend on leveraging in this position as your state representative. I know that the Chapter 70 funding and Chapter 90 funding is a formula, and it is next to impossible to change that formula. However, things like circuit breaker and regional transportation money that has been left on the table in the past, I will rally for hard and do everything I can to make sure that we get the most funding we can. It's now more than ever is important because of the funding that has come down from the federal government that goes away in 2024. ESSER funds are baked right into our budgets. I know full well where as 6% increase in our school budget alone this year, my fear down the road is that we'll have to cut programs and staff and leave our kids in a lurch. So again, I'm Byron Lane, I'm from Newburyport, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
My name is Dawn Shand, and I am running to be the Democratic nominee for the 1st Essex State Representative. I am a 20-year resident of Newburyport, a community volunteer, a public school parent, an author, and a nonprofit leader. And as president of the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, I have been an unapologetic champion for women's rights. In that role, I have built coalitions. I have worked with state and national partners to pass common sense legislation on Beacon Hill. I am the only candidate in this race who is part of the Beyond Roe Coalition, which made Massachusetts a national leader in reproductive health equity in the wake of the disastrous Supreme Court decision. And I am proud to be endorsed by the Massachusetts AFL-CIO in this race. I grew up in Selma, Alabama. I was part of the first and only generation to attend its integrated public schools. And that experience taught me something very important, that everyday people have to work to build a better democracy. And that's why I'm running, to build a better Beacon Hill that works for all of us, together in coalition. I thank you for your support, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Ready for me?
I'm ready for you.
My name is Sam Richabi. I am, at the outset, I want to share with you that I'm the only military veteran in this race. I'm also the only one who has a law degree from New England Law. I'm the only one with a law degree. And my campaign is basically about shaking up the status quo on Beacon Hill. If you aren't mad at the indoctrination of our children, the sexualization that's occurring in public schools, the grooming of our young minds, if you aren't enraged at the destruction of our economy in reaction to COVID lockdowns and the firing of first responders for their refusal to take an experimental vaccine that's untested and financed by big pharmaceutical companies, paid for by taxpayers, if you are unwilling to speak up and fight for the people of Massachusetts who are harmed as a result of all these policies, then you don't belong on Beacon Hill. You don't belong as an elected state representative, and I will fight for the people of Massachusetts to roll back these oppressive measures and to make sure that these things do not happen again. I'll leave you with this thought, right? There are two parties in Massachusetts. It's not Democrat versus Republican. It's establishment versus everybody else, and I propose to you that I am a candidate for everybody else. Thank you for coming out here today.
All right, so first question, CJ, you get first crack at this. So there are many who believe Massachusetts works best with a Republican governor and Democratic-led state house. Considering how popular Charlie Baker has been during his years leading the state, do you agree with that belief? And if you do, why?
Honestly, I mean, Charlie Baker was a great governor. I don't, you know, it's so hard to, listen, the only reason I'm here as a Republican is because that was my only option. I don't believe in labels. I believe in voting for the best candidate. Charlie Baker did a great job during COVID. Massachusetts is the greatest place to live. I keep saying it, love where you live. There's a great balance in this state. We have, the state is the #1 state in regards to education in the country. It's #1 in health care. It's the safest gun in regards to, it's the safest state in regards to gun laws. Massachusetts is doing a great job. I believe that I'm a Massachusetts conservative with conservative values here in Massachusetts. Charlie Baker did a great job, if that's the question you're asking.
Byron, do you want me to repeat the question? Or?
Yeah, if you could,
Sure.
please.
So there are many who believe Massachusetts works best with a Republican governor and a Democratic-led state house. Considering how popular Governor Baker is, and during his, do you agree with that belief, and why?
Yeah, you know, checks and balances are great. When it comes right down to it, it's good to have checks and balances. However, Charlie Baker was a more moderate Republican. I don't think the same would be true if he was more conservative Republican having a Democrat House. I believe in harmony. I believe that there's always two sides to every story, and that's how I make my decisions as on council. I listen to all the facts and I go from there, and at the end of the day, my heart is what guides me. So I agree with that we do need checks and balances. I feel like we need a lot more conversation to bring us all together as one as well. All too often we get tied up in, you know, what's your label? What party are you from? I'm of the belief of listening to all voices and going from there. So while I do agree with that statement that, you know, checks and balances are good, I think that common sense is good as well.
Tom, would you like me to repeat the question, or you got it? Okay.
I would just point out that Newburyport and Salisbury will have Republican coverage, and that Senator Bruce Tarr will be the senator who represents our area. So if you feel that we do need checks and balances, we will have them. I personally am looking forward to having Maura Healey as our next governor.
I'm personally not a fan of Governor Baker, big surprise. I actually sued him back in 2020 because I alleged that he violated my civil rights. The case was dismissed, but he's no fan of me, I'm sure. And I just want to remind everybody that under Charlie Baker's leadership, a whole bunch of people died in the soldiers' home as a result of mixing people who had COVID with senior citizens. And under his leadership, a whole bunch of state troopers were fired. They were dishonorably discharged from service, and they're still fighting to be restored. So I push back on the idea that he's really a Republican governor. I do think that we're ruled by one party in the state, and I would like to see an actual Republican governor like Jeff Deal get elected, who has promised to restore the state troopers to their previous positions. And I mean, it is what it is. You know, I believe that competition benefits the consumers, and in this case, consumers are the voters. So yeah, I would like to see more Republicans in the state house, as well as the main office and the executive branch.
Okay. Byron, this question is for you first. So the health of the Merrimack River is of vital importance to the entire region. While combined sewer overflows, or CSOs reporting, is now mandated by state law, what else would you do, or what needs to be done to protect the river?
I've been saying it all along through my time in council that I would love to see some more accountability be held for the upriver communities. And I'm not saying that in terms of, you know, penalizing them. I'm saying that in terms of helping them get the funding that they need to fix the problem. I'm a fisherman. I've grown up along the banks of the Merrimack River. It's a big concern of mine that the health of the river is awful, and the CSO problem has got to be addressed. I feel that in the role, I would be able to use my voice and my experience, and also the things that I've done already with things like the Merrimack watershed, and various leaders who have carried the torch to this date in fixing that problem. It's a very near and dear problem to me, and that's how I intend to fix it, is rallying and helping upriver communities fix the problem that they need, get the funding that they need, and holding their feet to the fire when it happens. Recently, we had CSOs dumped as of 2 weeks ago. We know that we haven't had a lot of rain, however, the dumping has occurred. This concerns me greatly, and I'm dedicated to fixing the problem.
Shall I repeat the question, or do you got it? Okay.
No. I have worked with state and national partners to pass common sense legislation. We will do that again in partnership with our federal delegation. Lori Trahan has worked very hard to bring federal money, particularly ARPA money, to both New Hampshire, where we're seeing the CSO problem, and Manchester in particular. I'm also the only candidate who has written extensively about rivers, and that is part of my long history of publications. So I feel like I have a great deal of knowledge about how rivers work and experience in working in coalition to solve these very complicated problems.
Sam?
To fix the CSOs that are occurring on the Merrimack River, I heard it will cost billions of dollars to do so, and I support fixing it. I don't want to see sewage being dumped into our rivers. I believe that we should be doing it right. Fixing these things will create jobs, it'll put lots of people to work, it'll be a boon to our economy. But if we're going to do it right, then my cousin, when I was a kid, he owns a plumbing business, and he talked about Newburyport. We all grew up in Newburyport, and the way that Newburyport does their water supply is they tap the Artichoke Reservoir, they process the water to make it clean enough for us to consume it. We barely dirty it. It goes down to the sewage treatment plant on the Merrimack River, where it gets cleaned up again, and then we dump it into the river. And he goes, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal, wouldn't be that difficult to reprocess that water a little bit more and make it reusable, and then just pump it back to the reservoir. And in times like now, when we're dealing with the drought, we should be trying to figure out ways to be creative to preserve our resources. And I think that that's one of the things that we should really consider doing. It sounds gross that we might be consuming water that was once used already in our households, but if we're planning for the future, we really need to be thinking about ways to preserve our resources. And I think that a system like that, where we reuse our water that's already been barely used once, we might actually have such a surplus that we could be sharing and selling it to places that need it as well.
Thanks. Don, this question's for you first.
Oh, I didn't get an answer.
I'm sorry, CJ, my bad. You're going.
So for anybody that don't know what combined sewer overflows is, it happens when we get a lot of rain, it mixes with sewerage, gets dumped into the river. Well, there are solutions to fix this, but we need to encourage green infrastructure, such as constructed wetlands, rainwater harvesting, which is much easier to utilize than repurposing sewer water, and pervious pavements, so the water drains naturally down back into the land, right? So that's my answer.
All right, Don. So political divisiveness and polarization appears to be rampant, not only nationally but locally as well. Do you agree with that assessment? If so, why? Do you believe it is time to reverse course and to bridge differences?
I believe that Beacon Hill works best when we work in coalition together. I think the job is to represent the shared concerns of the 4 districts. They have been very clear about what those are. And I believe that they are not divisive, or even political, or even partisan. Education funding should not be partisan. Rebounding from the pandemic should not be partisan. And, taking care of an environment, particularly water resources that we rely on, I don't see that as a progressive or a conservative issue. Those are the shared basic problems that this district faces, and there are legislative solutions to them, and there is money to be had from the state to invest in those problems.
Sam?
Again, I don't think that it's appropriate for us to go to Beacon Hill and try to get along just for the sake of getting along. That's how the general public ends up getting the short end of the stick when it comes to politics. I want an elected representative that's going to go there and represent my interest, not go to community taking photo shoots and shaking hands just for the sake of being in the news. So as far as political divisiveness is concerned, it is rampant. And I don't know what the solution is for that, but at the same time, like, I've been doing activism for years. I've been on the receiving end of felony attacks just for trying to have my voice be heard in the public square. And every single time that this happens, I'm the one who gets called names. I'm the one who's told that I need to be quiet and let everybody else have their discussion in the public square, and I'm unwilling to let my voice be silenced in such a manner. So until we can figure out ways to move forward in a non-divisive manner, I unfortunately think that there's not much we can do about it. And I honestly point my finger right at the media for misrepresenting points of view of conservatives and Republicans who really want to engage with people who are on the other aisle, but are unable to do so because the people who are on the other aisle and the people who are reporting on these things are not doing so in good faith.
CJ?
Well, I guarantee you, if Sampson is our next state rep, that we'll be guaranteed that Merrimack, Newburyport, Amesbury, and Salisbury gets no attention. He's committed to fighting with the establishment.
Yes, I am.
You know, listen, I'm there. I'm going to work with the folks in Beacon Hill. I've reached out to every one of these candidates. I think that we have some great candidates here. I think that they're wonderful people. We live in the greatest place in the world, right here in the first Essex. We live in the greatest place in the world. We should be very proud of who we are here in Massachusetts. We need little change. You know, we need to fix our roads. We need to, fix our schools. We need a new senior center in Salisbury. We need a new fire department in Salisbury. We need a new fire department in Newburyport, which is getting done. We need a new fire department and police department in Amesbury. We need all these things. And we need somebody that's going to go to Beacon Hill and is going to fight for money for those projects. Lenny Mira did a great job in Merrimack, and if you go and visit Merrimack, they have a great police station and they have a great fire station. We need somebody on Beacon Hill that's going to get along with other legislators and is going to find money for the projects that need to be done here in the first Essex.
Byron?
Yeah, political divisiveness it's a major problem in today's society. Too often we're set to dig in our heels and not listen to the other side. I am a Democrat. I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I have deep Democratic roots. When I asked, my mother early on in life, I said, what does it mean, Democrat, Republican? And she said, Democrats take care of other people. They take care of everyone. And that's how I've lived my life. And I mean, I've been accused, openly of not being a Democrat, which baffles me, quite frankly. I'm committed to working with everyone, and I always lead with that I've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that's to listen to everyone first and then speak. So my intention as state representative is to listen to all people and to, again, guide with common sense. I want to be able to help people, and it doesn't matter what party you're in. My intention is to help you and to help this region. And I will raise my son the same way. And I'm sure he will be a Democrat, too, for the same reasons. And I'm unapologetically a Democrat that will listen to all people and take care of all people whenever I can.
All right, one more question. Sam, beach erosion is a serious problem on both Salisbury Beach and Plum Island. What would you do to address that issue?
This is an unpopular opinion. I don't know if we can fight Mother Nature, okay? It seems to not make much sense to me to think that we can stop erosion from occurring, and everything that we do is a temporary solution that's financed by the taxpayers. And so like I said, this is not a very popular position to be taking, but if you're purchasing beachfront property where the beach is eroding right up to your house, then maybe you should figure out that issue for yourself, because there's not much that we can do other than funnel money from taxpayers all of the taxpayers of Massachusetts for a very select few people who live on the beach. And I don't think that that's right. If there is a way to create a nonprofit where these homeowners can pool their resources together, if we can find a way to finance it through private means, then great. Have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dredge up the Merrimack River and dump the sand on the beaches every year like it needs to be done. But otherwise, maybe people should stop purchasing waterfront property where they know the beach is eroding right up to their homes.
CJ?
Dune stabilization with beach grasses to help keep the dunes in place with grass tall enough to act as a natural wind barrier is one solution. But the truth is science. It shows us that water levels are rising. Science needs to catch up to the rising waters in order for the coastal homes to continue to be safe. Studies are being done to figure out solutions. I will constantly fight for more relief for our coastal residents.
Byron?
This is something that I've dealt with firsthand. I personally have seen over the past year 200 acres of Plum Island disappear. Again, being a fisherman, I've noticed also that the current has increased. I know that the dredge is scheduled to occur at some point in September, and actually today reached out to get an update on that. I also know that Salisbury between beach access 6 and 8 has been seriously impacted as well with this. I am all for seeing what the dredge does. I was one of the first ones on the beach for those residents who are in need of our help to ensure that their homes are not lost. I see it differently than Mr. Riccioppi. I would like to help those people where they've owned those homes for a long time and have the same memories as your home. So as your rep, I'm already in the process of helping with the beach erosion problem if there is a solution. And I will fight hard for those residents that have those homes on Plum Island in Salisbury. That is our treasure of this area, is our beachfront. We need to protect that and do whatever we can for those people who live along that beachfront.
Dawn?
In Salisbury, we need a better relationship with DCR. That is state-owned land, and they should do a better job of protecting it. That would do a great deal to help beachfront property owners. In Plum Island, we need to hold accountable the Army Corps of Engineers for building a jetty and allowing that jetty to have certain holes in it that create scour ends and that have caused significant erosion on Reservation Terrace. I believe all of those processes are in order, and I think that's the best we can do at the moment.
So at this point, I'd like to invite folks to ask each other questions. I'm at CJ. You get to choose one person and ask them a question, and they have a minute to respond. So whenever you're ready.
Do I have to ask a question?
No, it's your choice if you don't want to.
Sampson, do you think that Donald Trump was cheated out of the last election?
I don't think that this is relevant to Massachusetts politics, but I do believe that elections integrity is something that we need to ensure, because if our elections are no longer valid, then neither are our system of laws and government. So I respectfully don't want to answer what my opinion is on that matter, because I don't think it matters to the voters in Massachusetts.
All right, Byron, your turn.
Dawn, taking yourself out of the equation, who among these candidates would you vote for?
I think CJ is doing a really nice job tonight with this debate and has shown some exceptional knowledge of ecosystems. And Byron, you're a Democrat, and I think you are showing some very deep understanding of the concerns of the district. Sampson, I just don't think you and I will ever agree on anything.
I agree with that.
All right, Dawn, your turn.
How about Byron? I think you've really campaigned on being a Jim Kelcourse-style representative. And I just wondered if you had really given any thought to how you might be different than Mr. Kelcourse.
Yeah, the very foundation of it is that I'm a Democrat and Mr. Kelcourse was a Republican. I think at his constituent services, I think he knocked it out of the park. I think he supported a lot of our businesses when we needed him most. He did a lot for the people who were facing challenges with our unemployment system at the time. My focus is more on leveraging my existing relationships at the House already. I think a lot of money was left on the table because he was a Republican, and I also will rally like I said, my existing relationships with some of the House leadership to get those funds, things like the regional transportation money, things like circuit breaker money, and bring that back to our district to offset some of the delta that we're facing down the road.
My turn?
Your turn?
So this will be for Byron. A group that I recently met with called Citizens for Responsible Education told me that they provided you with 4 books that were taken from the Knock library that contains sexually explicit content that was being provided to 4th graders. They also contacted you regarding the drag queen dance that occurred recently. They said that you initially expressed outrage at these items, not at the group, but because these things were occurring. Since then, they've alleged that you've kind of ghosted them and you've gone quiet. So I'd like to ask you, what is your position on these types of things? Should these sexually explicit books be provided to minors with no context? And should the taxpayers be paying for things like drag queen dances at taxpayers' expense?
Yeah, sure. I was approached by them, and again, I feel it was because I listened to them. That's how, again, like I live my life by listening to people. These books, I brought it to the attention of the mayor. Ultimately, that's his decision, and connected the two so they could have a conversation. This group that you're talking about lost me completely when I received a phone call saying, I will meet my maker for supporting these things. I was literally threatened by this group, okay? So in terms of the NYS dance, the problem there was communication. It was put out in a manner that was put out as drag yourself to the drag show. At the very surface, I looked at that and said, I don't think that's age appropriate. However, when I listened and I got the information that I needed, there was no harm in that. And I embraced it for those kids that wanted to have that dance and need an outlet. And I will always step up for those in need.
All right, so we have time for one more question for each of you. So, CJ, do you think you can do one?
Oh, you want me to ask another
Another
question?
question to anyone you want.
Can I go
I'm
last?
sorry, you're closest to me. I just,
Dawn Shand. Let me see. Let's see. Your time in Alabama. How did that teach you how to be in politics up here in Massachusetts? And what's the difference?
Oh, CJ, thank you for that question. I appreciate that chance to talk about Alabama. I grew up in Selma in the wake of the voting rights movement. So I understood how difficult it was to build a new democracy. I mean, essentially, the voting rights movement enfranchised, 60% of the population in our area. And I watched how hard everyday people had to work, in the school system, in everyday life. And I think it gave me a profound appreciation for the moment that we are in right now and how hard we have to work to make sure that our democracy remains strong.
Byron.
CJ, take yourself out of the equation. Who would you vote for?
Man, I'd vote for you because you're kind of short and fat like myself.
I don't know. That's up to him if he wants to repeat that.
Oh, I said I would vote for him because he's short and fat like me. Not quite as handsome, but
Don, your turn.
And he's a nice guy, isn't he? He's a sweetheart.
Sampson, I thought I should give you a chance to talk about Pride Straight Parade, and I was really curious why that as an initiative was something you felt so passionate about.
Well, I've been a free speech activist since 2017. I do believe that speech is under attack and that the public square has been dominated by one party. And when in 2019, it was an unpopular thing to be talking about things like Drag Queen Story Hour and the fact that families, the family unit is under attack. And here we are just 3 short years later, and this is a common thing that's being discussed in school committees, on political campaigns, and all sorts of things. So for people who are critical of my activism, I put forth to you that we were just a few years ahead of the game as far as like the Straight Pride Parade. A lot of that was tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, it created a lot of opportunities for us to be discussing very serious matters. And for people like me, I don't have money, I can't buy the media, but doing things like that gives me a voice. It causes the media to contact me and allows us to put forward a discussion that otherwise was not occurring in the public square.
All right, Sam, you got one question for someone?
I do. Well, I thought we were going to have questions for every one of the candidates, so I'm torn between 2 here, but Dawn, as president of the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, I have no doubt you have an opinion on this matter. It's been a very popular thing that's going around online. There was a documentary about this, and this question was asked of our newest Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. What is a woman?
A woman is a person who says she's a woman.
Okay. So we have time for a few more questions, I think 1 or 2. All right, I'll go CJ with you again. You ready?
Let's go, man.
All right. Do you support the proposed Fair Share Amendment, and why?
The Fair Share Amendment is that question 1? Is that what we're talking about? What is Fair Share Amendment? Yeah, question 1. I don't support the Fair Share Amendment, and I'll tell you why. The Massachusetts has 8% corporate income tax, 6.25% sales tax, and 5% flat income tax. Question 1 will drive businesses, taxpayers, and shoppers across the border to New Hampshire. Question 1 will add them a minimum of $40,000 to qualifying taxpayers. This will decrease home values and will cost revenue to the state. We don't have a revenue problem here. We have a spending problem. And we can't drive our high income earners away. We just can't. And this is going to affect home values also. Because any home value that's sold over $1 million, you're going to have an extra 4% tax on that too. And we're not far away, man. I live in a $500,000 house. That was $200,000 when I bought it. You know, how long until that's $1 million? This is going to cost us. We're in competition with the state of New Hampshire. They're going to win in this. This is going to drive things away. It's going to cost Massachusetts.
Byron?
I do support the Fair Share Amendment. I signed the pledge on Sunday, as a matter of fact. And I had some reservations about the Fair Share Amendment when I first heard about it before I was explained to it further. And I reached out to folks who earn over $1 million a year and consecutively for a period of 3 years. Their answer to me was, I don't mind paying extra tax. I've made money, and if it's going to go towards schools and infrastructure, absolutely. I see the Fair Share Amendment as a way to make up that delta in not that many years for money that we're going to need for infrastructure and for schools. I think it's a great thing, and again, as your rep, when there's a pot of money that comes in like the Fair Share Amendment, there's going to be 351 cities and towns vying for that money for the same exact purpose. My goal is to get as much as we can for this area.
Dawn?
I do support the Fair Share Amendment. I think there's something very powerful about knowing where your tax dollars are going, particularly at a moment where our transportation, particularly public transportation, is literally on fire. And we know that schools in our district had to cut $1 million from their budget at a time when there was a $5 billion surplus at the State House. So I think we will be dealing a great deal with economic reform and tax reform in the next legislative session. And like Maura Healey, I do support the Fair Share Amendment.
Sam?
I don't support the Fair Share Amendment. We're in an environment that is post-COVID where our economy was ravished and businesses were forced to close, and yet somehow we have a multi-billion-dollar surplus, and our question is whether we want to increase taxes on businesses, because essentially the people who are making over $1 million a year are business owners. A lot of these business owners are fleeing the state because of the oppressive measures that are being levied against them, and what we're talking about is increasing the burden on the people who put people to work. And I believe that something like the Fair Share Amendment is going to further drive businesses to leave this state. It's going to put an increased burden on consumers who are going to have to deal with the costs because, as we all know, when taxes go up, the businesses don't just absorb that. They increase their prices. They increase the cost for everything, and it's the consumers who ultimately end up having to pay their share of the Fair Share Amendment. So no, I think what we should be doing is trying to figure out ways to put money back in people's pockets. That means reducing taxes. That means making us, like CJ was saying, more competitive with our neighbors to the north in New Hampshire. I live right on the New Hampshire border. My entire life, I've been going to New Hampshire to get away from the Massachusetts sales tax. I think that in order for us to remain competitive, to become competitive in the first place, we need to get rid of these taxes and keep the money here in the state.
All right. I like this one. So how do you think your community involvement and beliefs will help the people of the First Essex District? Byron, you want to go?
Sorry, can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. How do you think your community involvement and beliefs will help the people of the First Essex District?
Sure. I've proven this. In March of 2020, when COVID hit, I was approached by a few single nurses who explained to me better what COVID meant to them. My mother was a single nurse. They said, how can I help you? We need masks. I shut down my business. I put up my own money to the tune of $27,000 because I had a source that got one of the 11 CDC-approved masks, and with the hopes that everybody would chip in and give back that money. I took the ball, I ran with it. I approached many government agencies and tried to get them to use my source to bring these masks in. I was approached by Governor Baker's office 10 days prior to when the masks were all confiscated and no longer available, and good luck getting CDC approved. So through these measures, that, and as well as my community involvement as a realtor, and my charity, North Shore Bikes for Kids, which my own money I spent every year to buy 100 bikes for kids in need that was given out through Community Giving Tree for those kids that could now stay in their districts when they had to move. That was their only means of transportation. It was their only means to stay in touch with their friends. And I'm proud that I've led these efforts in my community. I intend on doing that further.
Don?
The point of being a community volunteer is that you see people at their most vulnerable. In 2007, I wrote the Rotary grant that got Newburyport's public schools funding to begin their literacy project. I have served with Among Friends and fed the neediest people in our communities. I have served as the Mass Women's Political Caucus president and worked tirelessly to help people expand their education capabilities to know how to run for office at every single level of government. I know how difficult that can be. But the point is that you really come to understand what the needs are, often the unspoken needs. You know, so often in the public sphere, in public comment, you hear loud voices. And being a community volunteer lets you understand what the quiet voices are and what those needs are, and lets you then take that experience to Beacon Hill and advocate for those needs as well.
Sam?
I've been in Boston going to school for the past 7 years, but I've lived in this district my entire life. I'm well connected with all sorts of members of the community, including I have a bunch of friends who have died as a result of the opiate crisis, right? Now, we all probably know somebody who suffered as a result of opiates, whether it's addiction, overdose, suicide. But until we actually get out and start asking these people, what can we do to help you, we're not going to solve this problem. I'm well connected with a lot of people who are suffering right now. I volunteer with the Salisbury Housing Authority. These are people who are low income that need, there's a shortage of housing, okay? My connections to the community are, I'm not going to be the guy who goes around shaking hands and taking pictures. I'm going to be the guy who tries to restore the role of government in our lives back to what it was originally intended. Government isn't supposed to be the answer to everything, every single problem that society has to offer. That's how we got in this mess to begin with out of control spending and taxation. I want to empower nonprofits and leaders in the community to help solve these issues without the government either facilitating or standing in the way of solutions, because odds are, if there's an issue in society, the government is more likely standing in the way between the problem and the solution rather than facilitating it.
Thank you.
Okay, I admit it. I'm the guy that's walking around taking all these pictures and shaking people's hands. Okay, you caught me. Anyway, there's a lot of people in this room, including Lou Masiallo, Freeman Condon, Terry Maringi, Mike Colburn. Over in Salisbury, we do a lot for the community with the SBBA. We've done beach cleanups together. We've done, I'm the president of the Salisbury Lions Club. We were the first guys, Mike Colburn and I, that were out there fundraising for the fire victims on January the 17th. Mike Colburn maybe spent about $500 on cell phones for all these homeless people that turned homeless, and it was in the poorest section of Salisbury. Mike always pushes me to go the extra mile. But as the president of the Lions Club, we're very involved in the community. We do a lot in the community. Freeman Condon was very involved in the fundraising for the fire victims too. Listen, I love where I live, right? I love the people that I live with. I'm involved in so many great organizations in Salisbury, including SCTV, which just had a tremendous fundraising event for the Boys and Girls Club. I'm involved with the Boys and Girls Club. That's what I do. Listen, I'm gonna give up a very high-paying job because I love taking care of people, okay? That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. I want to be elected so I can take care of the constituents. And that's it. I mean, if people don't want to vote for me, they don't have to. But listen, I love where I live, and I give back. And I shake hands and I kiss babies and I take pictures.
Okay, thanks. So we have time for one more question.
I'll get one for you later with you.
We have time for one more question. So Dawn, you go first. So in addition to your community outreach, like what skills have you acquired that would enable you to effectively deliver services for constituents and work with folks on Beacon Hill? Can you go on that a little bit?
Certainly. Well, I work with people all the time to address their fundamental needs, their fundamental insecurities about running for office. I talk to state, federal delegation members all the time about how we pass legislation that makes our democracy stronger. We have worked to do campaign finance reform. We have worked on issues like bringing down the cost of mammograms. And I think the point is, like, you begin to understand that Beacon Hill can deliver fundamental and pragmatic solutions to people's everyday problems.
Sam?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I'll try to mumble through it. Yes. What skills have you acquired, in addition to your community outreach, what skills have you acquired that will enable you to effectively deliver constituent services and work on Beacon Hill?
Well, I think that our elected representatives view the taxpayers of Massachusetts as just a means of extracting wealth from the Commonwealth to bring it back to their own districts, right? It seems to be that the measure of a good state rep is how much money can you bring to the community. And I put forth to you that regardless of whether people like me or not, that money is still going to exist. It's still going to end up in the community. Contrary to what CJ said, if I was the representative, there's still going to be money coming here. I want to read, I studied economics. It's changed my life, okay? I understand that every single thing the government does puts barriers between the free market and the people who are enjoying it, right? Every single time we spend a dollar, government spending, every time the government spends a dollar, it has to come from somewhere. We're not able to just print money out of thin air like the federal government does. We need to reduce the government's role in our lives. My skills that I have to bring, I graduated from law. I'm going to draft my own legislation. I'm not just going to talk about the things that I support. Like, I'm going to draft legislation, I'm going to introduce the legislation, and I'm going to debate these things. And if people don't, if I'm putting forth common sense laws that people disagree with because I'm a Republican, we're going to identify those people who are just stonewalling good legislation, and we're going to run candidates against them in 2024 to make sure that they're not back in office again.
All right, thank you. CJ?
Hey, I just spent 29 years of my life in the same business taking care of people. I am a rep. I'm a rep for an auto auction. I've been a rep in for the auto auction for many decades. But really, my skill set is communicating with people. I've spoken to most of you here tonight. That's my skill set. And contrary to what Samson says, people genuinely take care of the people they like. And if I can get on the Beacon Hill and I can shake the hands of the people that are Democrats and the people that are Republicans, we get something done, We can put a deal together, I'm not going to draft legislation that's going to go nowhere. I'm not going to legislation has to work for everybody. And I'm not going to fight against everybody. I'm going to work with everybody. And that's going to help my constituents. I'm going to work to get my constituents what they need. Just like Jim Kelcourse did. The guy did an amazing job. Anytime I needed something, anytime most of you guys here needed something, that man was there. And that's what I want to continue. I want to continue a legacy that Jim Kelcourse had taking care of people. And that's what I'm going to do.
Byron, you're up.
Can you just read it one more time? We've
Sure.
kind of gone sideways a little bit.
So in addition to your community outreach, what skills have you acquired which will enable you to effectively deliver constituent services and work with folks in Beacon Hill?
Sure. My career has been all over the map. When I was 19, I started with the Sheriff's Department. I worked in law enforcement for 10 years, just shy of 10 years. I worked in the Community Correction Center, which was the first of its kind. I worked on the road, even in Salisbury, West Newbury, and I dispatched in Westford. I've dealt with people at their worst, and I've been able to help them through that. I then moved on to the private sector and worked for Merrill Lynch as a financial advisor. Much different needs, much different people that I dealt with. But they also had real-world problems as well, and I was able to help them through that. What I gravitated towards as a realtor was the ability to help everybody that I came in contact with. That's my goal, is to help everybody I come in contact with. So that experience alone has brought me to the point in my life where I'm very comfortable of going to the super of super rich people and seeing what their problems are, and going to the poorest of poor, going to the people who are affected by the opioid epidemic and seeing what they need, working with homes in terms of working with, with programs such as the Link House, Pelican Intervention. Finding solutions for people is what I am good at. I've proven this through my actions, and that's how I intend to help as your representative.
All right, so we each have a minute for closing statements. I'm sorry, CJ, but you're first.
Why am I always first?
You're number one.
I just want to say Dave Rogers is picking on me. Don't start the timer yet. Listen, I just want to say thank you. Hey, I'm reaching out right now to the independents and the Republicans and the moderates. You know, the people that are on the far right, they're not going to support me. I mean, they think that they think some crazy thoughts, you know. But I'm reaching out to the moderates and the independents out there and the Democrats that want to change parties. Come on over, write me in. I'm CJ Fitzwater. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to fight with the neighbors. I'm not going to fight with the Democrats. I'm not going to fight with the Republicans. I'm going to fight for the people. I'm going to fight for you, Lou. I'm going to fight for you, Freeman. I'm going to fight for you because I like your glasses. But not only do I like your glasses, but you're a voter, and you live right here. I'm going to fight for all of you. I'm going to fight for her. She gave me a scrawl because she knows I'm pro-choice. But I love where I live, and I'm going to fight for this place. Thank you.
All right, Byron, you're up.
Sure. I'll try not to get emotional. I do when I talk about my son. He's the reason I do everything. I want him to see me do great things. And to do that, I want to do great things for you. I appreciate the opportunity to sit here today and where I've come. And I feel that my role on City Council has brought me to this point where I'm ready to take the next level. I'm ready to move up, and I'm ready to help even more people than just the people of Ward 6 in Newburyport. So I ask you all to believe in me and to vote for me. Thank you.
Dawn, your turn.
Thank you. Look, the state ended with a $5 billion surplus. We know that schools are cutting budgets, the commuter rail is unreliable, we know that we need a more equitable rebound from the pandemic. There is work to be done on Beacon Hill, and I have the relationships, the skills, and the experience to get things done there. I have worked to build coalitions, and I have, an exceptional knowledge of how Beacon Hill works right now, and I'm very excited to build a Beacon Hill that works for all of us. Thank you.
Sam?
So I've talked a lot about the things that I, fight, right? I'm not all fight. I think that there's actually a lot of overlap between us, things that we could actually agree upon. I think the MBTA is kind of a disaster right now. I've taken the commuter rail, I've rode the T in Boston. I think that there's a lot of common ground as far as determining how we can fix these things. We also agree that the opiate crisis is something that needs to be combated. I'd like to see changes, and I think if you strip away the labels and we talk about issues by themselves, we could have a real reasonable discussion without labeling each other as far right or far left, right? I did engage in some divisive stuff tonight, but I want voters to realize that when it comes to advocating for issues on Beacon Hill, I'm not going to shy away from a fight if it comes to it. I would rather get along with people than constantly be fighting them. But I'm also not going to go there and get along just for getting along. So if you want to learn more about me, you can find me at www.samson4ma.com. Thank you.
Great. So that about wraps it up for tonight's forum. I'd like to thank the 4 candidates for participating in the Newburyport Senior Center / Community Room for their hospitality. And be sure to vote on September 6th. And for early voting times, please visit your community's webpage. And that's a wrap. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.